Thank you. Good. Well, I thought I would read from the last book, the latest book that I wrote, and this book is called The Force of Character and the Lasting Life, and it is about what is called in America aging, meaning we do go through a biological process and time leaves its marks. But the understanding of aging in our culture is dismal, especially in the United States. So it seemed to me that this subject needed a psychological approach. And I want to read some little pieces from it. And I need first, though, to sort of explain what I mean by a psychological approach. And also to explain maybe or lay out the way I do things, which is different, I think, from the usual way of doing things. I'm going to take the biological phenomena, but give them a completely different turn. And I'll give you a few examples of that this evening. But I need to read the first paragraph of the book, which really sets it all up. That aging is no accident. That's absolutely the first thing. Aging is no accident. It's necessary to the human condition and intended by the soul. That's the assumption. Aging is built into our physiology, yet, to our puzzlement, human life extends long beyond fertility and outlasts muscular usefulness and sensory acuteness. For this reason, we need imaginative ideas that can grace aging and speak to it with the intelligence that it deserves. You realize that, the real thing is, why do we live so long? Other mammals give way while we go on 40 or 50, sometimes 60 years beyond menopause. We stay on, lingering in our recliners or marching the treadmill at 88. What for? What is this fact that we go on living so long and cluttering up the earth? Now, biology doesn't help us with this, so we need another view. And the view of this book is that it is for the sake of character, that the last part of life, or the whole question of aging, is when character begins to emerge, solidify, present itself. But it does this through a very strange means, which is it gives us a lot of troubles, symptoms. And it's the symptoms where these facts of character begin to show themselves. So I'd like to take up the middle part of the book, which is about all these troubles. Let's take one of the early ones that we all are familiar with. It's called gravity's sag. The contrast between youth, these don't work, you see, that's part of it. They must be left over from an earlier phase. The contrast between youth and age shows clearly in the shift from ascending to descending. The biology of younger times is a biology of literal growing up. The spine extends with resilient cartilage packed between the vertebrae, bones elongate. In later years, the pull of gravity takes over. Ambitious, upwardly mobile social climbing, career, and class no longer offer glamour. You no longer need to be among the beautiful people or stand on the top deck shouting orders. Instead, the great sag. Eye pouches, double chins, jowls, pendant breasts, hanging skin on upper arms, droopy belly, butt, scrotum, labia. Even the earlobes grow long toward the floor. The gaze is downward. We lower our head to watch our step. I grow old, I grow old, I shall wear the bottom of my trousers rolled, says the inward-turning, life-refusing J. Alfred Prufrock in T.S. Eliot's famous poem. Eliot was young when he wrote that. In Japan, bowing the upper body is not simply a mannered postural greeting, a show of deference. It is also a practice that builds the ancestor into one's framework. Old people are supposed to be bent over like the stalks of ripe rice. Our culture sees only osteoporosis. We see the body, but not its instruction. Or we get one bare message only: we're heading for the grave. Buried within the word grave are four distinct meanings: gravity, the mysterious physical force that draws all things down to the core; gravitas, the Roman word for weighty seriousness; the grave of the cemetery, where the body is laid to final rest; and gravide, pregnant, as we once said, heavy with child. Since words have their way with us, these meanings tend to fuse in our minds, violating the mental puritanism that strives to keep terms separated by clean definitions, uncontaminated with suggestive implications. Since these four meanings confuse, worries in older age may also be about the grave of death, about the weighty seriousness and implacable downward demand of the core. They may be about the grave of death, but also about the weighty seriousness and implacable downward demand of the core. The downward pull makes us anxious, focusing on the cemetery, waiting for it. More likely, that focus displaces more serious matters, the depths of gravitas and the invisible pregnancy that the aged are meant to bear. We old ones are the weight bearers, and nature grows us downward. In later years, our reach into the world has a short horizon. Think globally, yes, but only think globally. Despite the cruises and the campers, the action is local. We are back in the neighborhood as custodian. In our later years, we pull in the outposts. At 10, fantasy drives an exploring module around the moon. At 20, the Trans-Siberian Railway, or hunkering down to help natives in Mindanao. At 30, a year off in Tuscany or Tahiti. We station a couple of scouts at the perimeter of the empire, geographical and also intellectual. We shall take music lessons, learn Spanish dance, paint on a houseboat, read Proust, Gibbon, and Cervantes, open a restaurant, write a movie script or a detective novel, study Chinese, play the commodities markets. We begin to send a few more troops to these outposts, visit them, dwell there. We gather clippings, keep notes and addresses, mark possible future dates in the calendar. Then, as years pass, we begin to call the troops home, one by one. With lingering nostalgia, we abandon them to the sands and the wind, traceless fantasies. Some vanish without yearnings, more likely with amazement that they once seemed viable parts of the empire. Pulling in the outposts is simply calling home the possibilities and dropping into where you are, your place. And I tie the sag, the dropping and drooping of body parts, to a homing instinct. The home aimed for is not only here where you are, but farther down than the grave itself, the underworld, beneath the grave, which can be entered long before the actual grave in the actual cemetery. So many of the great mythical figures, Ulysses, Aeneas, Ioannina, Hercules, Psyche, Orpheus, Persephone, Dionysos, descended and gained a knowledge that deepened their characters. And this descent is crucial to that deepening. Growing down into the world by becoming useful to it and helping shape it requires getting down below the world. To be an elder or benefactor, conservator, and mentor calls for a learning about shadows, an instruction from the dead. That is, from what has gone before, become invisible, yet continues to vivify our lives with its influences. See, the dead are not necessarily the literal dead. It's that which has gone before, become invisible, yet continues to vivify our lives with its influences. The dead come back as ancestors, especially in times of crisis, when we are at a loss. Then the dead awaken, offering a deeper knowledge and support. They have already fallen. They know the pits, hence their enormous resources. They do not have to return as literal voices and visions, for they are already palpable in whatever is pulling us down, wherever we can't keep up. They are the force in the psyche's gravity. The old have gravitas when their insight reaches into the invisible core of things, into what is hidden and buried. These graver, pregnant meanings are not advertised in the daily round. The old hear into the gaps, smell what's not kosher, watch for small smiles that disguise the truth, all the necessary suppressions that make every day possible and nice. When the body begins to sag, it is abandoning sham and hypocrisy. The body leads the way down, deepening your character. It doesn't know how to lie. This may account for some of the nastiness of old people. They're thriving on wicked stories and twisted gossip, on surgical mistakes and bad doctors, crooked relatives, scandals, accidents, and ruined finances. They are tuned into the underworld, so they go to sleep reading crime novels and watching cop flicks. They enjoy the vicious psychopathy of the heroes and heroines of afternoon soap dramas, what we call in the States, and the bizarre pathologies exhibited on talk shows. They are more at home in the underworld of peculiarities than in the conventions of conformity. We like to idealize elders. We expect gravitas from them, benign wisdom. But these expectations are illusions unless we realize that this wisdom is on display in their bodies' deformations. When these deformations are read less through geriatric physiology than through imaginative psychology. Aging makes metaphor of biology. The organic changes are a form of poetic speech, rewriting personality into character. Let me try another little piece. This one's called Heightened Irritability. Let's not forget that strange combination of heightened irritability and calm patience that emerges in late life. On the one hand, older people have more passive tolerance. They will let the day go by uselessly, put up with inconveniences, refuse to be rushed and rattled. On the other hand, they fly off the handle with little provocation. Nothing more than a great-grandson's hairstyle, a late bus, a sound too loud or too low, an inattentive waitress, and whammo, the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air. In nursing homes, some demure elderly ladies who rarely speak above a whisper have to be tied, not because they might fall from their chairs and hurt themselves, but because they pinch and punch their caretakers. So quick is their fuse, so intense their irritability. A few centuries back, organic life at its most basic level was thought to display its vitality through its capacity to be irritated. Albrecht von Haller, an 18th century Swiss polymath and a man who was called the master physiologist of his time, established by means of 567 experiments on muscle cell contractions his theory of the irritability of the protoplasm. Haller's work and ideas gave rise to modern experimental physiology of the nervous system and muscle tissue, and also to what eventually became the lie detector. When our common language distinguishes between the quick and the dead, it alludes to the old notion of irritability as a basic sign of life. Quick to ignite is life itself, and what's dry burns all the faster. The trivial irritations that produce eruptions of rage are by no means trivial. Rage is like a cellular anger. It leaps up in defense of character, rejects interference, insists on maintaining our habitual way of life. Don't tell me what to do. Let me do it my way. This is how I like it. Irritability, a display of the raw urge to live. It shows the attachment of the flesh to living. We may replace Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, with I am irritated, therefore I am. If irritability is truly a vital sign, then the grumpy old men are keeping themselves going by virtue of their instantly arousable grumpiness. The slightest provocation sets off fits of pique and leads to plots of revenge. We need our political outrage, our social prejudices, our ridiculous hatreds, not only for the content of this hostility, but for the fire. Fury in old age is a regular phenomenon. You feel it mount when put on hold, when you can't reach the person you want to reach on the phone, when walking into a darkened movie theater and a pack of unknowns is blocking your way, when your parking space is taken before you can quite get to it. You hate everyone ahead of you at the counter. Who are all these people? You wish them dead. A bad-tempered spirit is as old as civilization, a given of human nature. Neither Swift nor Mencken, neither Marx nor Dorothy Parker could have written a word without it. Many societies have gods of rage and battle. Yahweh himself was a war god, given to terrifying, destructive moods, inflicting plagues, floods, and slaughter on his people with little provocation. The Greeks recognized and dramatized the anger of Hera, Athene, Aphrodite, Poseidon, Zeus, an anger embodied in the avenging Furies, who do not let sins pass and who bring a savage passion into the dramas of human lives. Advice to older people forgets all this. They are coddled with a mild diet of pudding and milk toast and polite condescension and soft answers. They're there. The actual fire of emotions is denied, as if old age were merely a time of recollection in tranquility. Serenity keeps irritability tamed, enslaving vitality and promoting the oppressions and injustices of the status quo. Had senior citizens, as we call them in the States, not joined the activists, not become infuriated at drunken driving, secondhand smoke, unsafe cars, the devastation of dolphins, these travesties would go on and on. The elders may have retired, but they are hardly retiring, nor should they be, since they are not only senior, but citizens. Their irritations can carry them to the front of the firing line, make them stand up in public meetings, lodge complaints, bring suit, fervid and fearless in defense of a cause. Could chronic, even explosive hostility be healthy? Research at the Minnesota Mayo Clinic discovered that, quote, older men tended to score on the high end of the hostility scale. It's the American way of saying older men get more angry. The higher end of the hostility scale, compared with younger men. Yet, the quote, to continue the quotation, the older man's relative hostility level did not seem to put him at a greater risk of heart disease, a result that did startle the researchers. See, the researchers are young and they're saying, calm down. They don't want that, calm down. They think it's bad for you to get angry. But the old men are showing them it's a good thing. The intensity of feeling can aid the transition to the condition of ancestors, for one of the ancestors' tasks is the sometimes violent protection of the living community. As guardian spirits, ancestors stand watch, attentive to the slightest indication that things are going wrong. Like the Furies, ancestors do not tolerate injustice. Calming meditative practices, needlepoint basketry, and the tranquilizers offered by your caring physician all acknowledge by trying to subdue the irritability of the protoplasm that will rage against the dying of the light. Anger could also indicate a desire for freedom from the long-lasting patterns of life. It is as if there is a spirit bottled up and doesn't want any longer to be caught in daily trivia, doesn't want to be in a body on this earth. Then the irritability expresses a frustration at having to be here and at waiting so long to leave. My friend Professor Malidoma Some, an initiated elder, says that among his people in Burkina Faso, the old ones are generally angry and ill-tempered, irritated by the banalities of the daily round. Part of them is already elsewhere, departed, and their irritation signifies that pull. Whether old people are irritable because of the cellular rage to live, or because they're impatient at still being here, either way, irritability belongs to late years. It will flare up spontaneously even when there are no provoking causes, and it cannot be tempered by patience, which keeps placid company side by side with bursts of peevish annoyance. Patience and impatience are only one set of opposing forces belonging to later years. Aging brings out all sorts of contradictions in human nature. All the complexes composing personality leap out of the basket. You become an unpredictable hydra, smiling, snappy, happy, grouchy, grumpy, all seven dwarfs. A religious believer might say this multitude of moods foreshadows another world, where all is welcome and nothing can be predicted, where the lifting up to heaven is simply lifting the lid from the fullness of character. The whole jumble of unpredictable dwarfs risen in flesh, just as they are, with no apologies. Now let's try another thing that goes with late life. Waking at night. Why do old people sleep less at night and slip into little naps in broad daylight, dozing off in the midst of company? Why this reversal of conventional sleeping habits? Unlike the young who can zone out and lie comatose right up until lunch, we lie awake in the dark and doze off in daylight. With the years, normal sleep gradually dwindles from the prescribed 8 hours to 6, even 5. Night, more and more, becomes our time. Against our will, the ancient goddess Nyx, night, is forcing us to become her devotees. So much goes on at night, not only dreams and reminiscences and prayers, not only fears, those visiting demons who sit at the edge of your bed and recount your blunders and worries and then fly off, as vampires do, once morning finally comes. Even more insistent are pressing toilet calls. In early years, the involuntary urge to urinate does not disturb sleep. Small children can wet their beds without waking. So strong is the child's need to stay asleep and to protect this sleep from waking in the night with its often fearful intruders. In late years, however, the urge to urinate interferes with sleep, as if the wisdom of the older body calls you to wake up. Bladder calls at night affect daytime living too. You must watch your evening fluid intake, avoid diuretics, plan ahead for stops when traveling. More and more nighttime creeps into the day. In stark physical terms, we feel trapped in a body over which we are losing control and whose nightly message is decay. Suppose, however, that getting up from sleep awakens you not only in the night, but to the night. Once in monasteries and nunneries, night watch was called vigil, and sleep was shortened on purpose, so that when the Lord of Temptations came calling and his minions tried to enter your thoughts at night, you could ward them off. You kept vigil. The early Christian monks who lived in desert caves tried to banish sleep altogether, since pagan powers were thought to approach pious souls through dreams. Moreover, since the visionary book of Revelation says, "There shall be no night there," in the kingdom to come, some religious orders have sought to approach that eternal day by literally banning sleep. So the devout person, intent upon building a strong character, was less eager to sleep than to keep watch at night. Character depended on fending off the fantasies and voices that threatened to lead one away from the Christian path. To fend them off, the devout had to open their eyes to the night so as to discriminate among the spirits. Now, awakening to the night opens a dark eye into the invisible world. It opens an acute ear to cautions, insights, and promptings that seem to visit only at night, disturbing sleep in order to be heard. We hardly suffer from the same crowd of anxieties and reconstructed nostalgic longings in daylight. This crowd of spirits that we call worry, self-castigation, anxiety, remorse, death terror, and erotic longing had similar names in the old world of the Mediterranean. For us, they are psychological abstractions. For the ancients, they were personified figures, children of Nyx, of night. We can see these invisible persons, night's offspring, painted on vases and carved in relief. There's one called fatalistic foreboding, or moros. One called fault-finding, called momos. One called punishers, keres, and avengers, nemesis. Angry persecutors, erines. Miserable distressed, oisis. And lustful longings, kupris. In other words, what we have psychologized as part of our internal troubles were actual figures that came and disturbed the night. They were children of the night. they were to be expected to visit during the night. The Bible calls Nyx by another name, Lilith, the night monster, quote, roaming with her retinue in the darkest hours of the night. Of course, Nyx had another side, a happier function. She brought ease to the weary, and her wide, dark wings spread protectively over the sleeping world. In later years, however, the shelter she affords interests us less than the crowding in of her plaguing offspring who demand we wake up in the dead of night. There's something you can do about understanding your body's clock. The biological clock intends to rouse us elders from sleep and awaken us to the darkness around us. Plato called for this awakening from darkness in his famous allegory of the cave. In the concluding two stanzas of one of William Stafford's finest poems about the erosion of character due to carelessness and inattention, he puts it like this: "So I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep." Evidently, we sleep less in later years because our tasks change. If once we were sheltered by night herself, now we must learn from her offspring, phantoms of fate, death, despair, blame, revenge, and desire won't let you rest. You have to discriminate among the invisible figures who share your home, even your bed, letting them awaken you, receiving their biting attacks, and studying the legitimacy of their claims. This is hard work. An hour or two with the children of Nyx, wide-eyed in a dark room, can be exhausting. Little wonder that some 80 different sleep disorders have been catalogued, and that there are 337 sleep disorder clinics in the United States. 10% of the population report a nightmare at least once a month. Little wonder then that so many of us take sleeping pills and wear incontinence pads so that we can rise in the morning without having had to tangle with and learn from the brood of Nyx. I do believe she wants us to know her better. Perhaps she takes offense at our methods of avoiding knowledge of the night. Our culture's light pollution and its after-dark noise levels may be offensive to her. Who knows? What place outdoors and nearby is free of artificial light and the sounds of civilization? How far do we have to travel to look up to a full sky of stars? What do you or I know about differentiating night beyond divisions into what are called by television prime time, late night, and bedtime? Do we know night's sounds and smells, where the constellations are, the moon's condition, and the soughing of the wind at dawn, how the house rattles and settles? Besides the animal creatures that thrive on the night's black air, besides thieves, third shift workers, jazz players, street walkers, and other night crawlers, all invisible in the daytime, besides these, inanimate things come alive in the dark, as so many fairy tales and ghost stories tell. The restless mind is besieged by insights. Lying sleepless, we develop a strange intelligence. Is this how the images of the dead communicate? How the ancestors instruct us? Many indigenous peoples wait until nightfall to sacrifice to ancestor spirits and to feast and dance to propitiate their fearful powers. Keeping vigil to know the night was one way of gaining strength from the invisible world. Keeping vigil to know the night was one way of gaining strength from the invisible world. Specific rituals belong to different phases of the night, as if the night had a variety of faces. In medieval Japan, there were clocks that told time by releasing smells. Every 2 hours, a different odor wafted through the air, so that on waking in the dark, you could literally sense what time it was. For us, night is mostly all the same. In our blinds-drawn room, we little know or care whether we awaken to is the darkness of midnight, 3 a.m., or just before daybreak. No patrolling watchman calls the hours, no bells peal from the towers and steeples, yet the body has its timekeeper, and nurses on night duty know how to expect certain crises in different patients at particular hours. We do not distinguish the parts of the night because we have yoked Nix to day world duties. We go to bed for oblivion, not for worry. Nighttime is for catching up on sleep, for being recharged for tomorrow, which will take off manic. We'll needle our scalps with a quick hot shower, this is the United States, followed by a jolt of juice, some cheery pops and snaps, a mug of sugared coffee, rituals to ban the last traces of Nix and her brood and the sleeping drugs we have taken to keep her at bay. If character is fate, and if the fates as avengers and pursuers are daughters of night, then character building may need the physiological changes that awaken the old into night. What else could so urgently awaken us? It seems character has underpinnings that sink into dark intelligence, an intelligence that settles into us in darkness and deepens our imagination of human life, its obscure obsessions, its irrational panics. Late in the night, we realize that the acts of our lives have not been shadow-free, that we are shadowed by curses and sins, not because we are cursed and sinful by nature, but because with the very origin of the world, one half of which belongs to night, some fearful figures come who demand we know them. All you know of the day world is only half knowledge. Character asks for a larger truth, a richer understanding, and the beginning of this wisdom is imparted by these dreadful visitations. Well, maybe one more little piece. Let's see. How about this little bit? It's from towards the end of the book. It's about it's called grand parenting. How to be a good parent. Guidance is easy to find on the self-help bookshelf. But what is grand parenting? And how does one move from parenting to something grander? To answer this question is to take on the question posed at the beginning of the book, why do we live so long? Especially women who may go on 50, 60 years beyond their fertility cycles. The selfish gene theory puts the egg before the chicken, because the sole activity and telos of genes is to create conditions for their own reproduction. Eggs use chickens to produce new eggs. Why does this theory not get rid of us once we are out of eggs? How account for the endurance of tough old birds? The endurance of older women signifies more for propagation of the human species than carrying viable eggs and birthing babies. Elderly women add to culture and help perpetuate the species by caring for the young, relieving pregnant and lactating mothers. Their care serves to reduce infant mortality, although they themselves may be infertile. Grandmothers, and I'm quoting now from Theodore Roszak, grandmothers empowered the human species to become the planet's dominant animal. He calls this the grandmother hypothesis. They also carry cultural knowledge. We may imagine elderly ladies void of ova, but packed with memes. Memes are the cultural equivalent of genes. Like genes, they are independent of their carriers. They transmit bits of culture from generation to generation. They are deposited in cultural artifacts like pictures, books, sayings. A meme's existence depends on a physical embodiment in some medium. Why not grandparents as that embodiment, that medium? Grandmothers and grandfathers maintain rituals and traditions, possess a hoard of primal stories, teach the young, and nurture the memory of the ancestral spirits who guard the community. Grandparents listen to dreams and tell you what a new word means. They can tie a fly, bait a hook, and know where the best place is. They live among odd objects which they cherish and smells unforgettable. They have little time left, yet so much time to spare. The intricate, subtle process that slowly makes soul in a human being, the hands-on knowledge of nature and of the street, of dreams, skills, manners, and tastes, and what happened before now and long, long ago, requires the intelligence of elders who devote themselves to other ends than pragmatic functioning. Their days of hunting and gathering, childbearing and nursing are past, yet their days continue because they have equally important duties: culture. I would add only this to Roszak's grandmother hypothesis. Grandparenting belongs in the character of the older person, begins in the character of the older person who has an eye on the character of the young ones and searches for their grander possibilities. A grandparent can afford visions grander than the difficult and dutiful routines of the parents. The old man's eyes may be clouded, but his vision may see clearly, partly because he is close to the child's affection. In many indigenous societies, the deeper instructive and effective connections skip a generation, since both grandparents and grandchildren are partly marginalized. The young fantast joins the old eccentric against a common opponent, the adult generation between them. The grandparent who has little culture backward can hardly carry culture forward. He may dispossess himself of his things as he ages, but he may not put down the baggage of knowledge and history. This knowledge and history cannot be found in books or viewed on a screen. It must be personified, spoken in words that are no longer current, displayed in styles no longer fashionable, present in faces that cannot dissemble. Elders are like living memes, units of cultural heredity, which make, in Roszak's words, higher evolution possible. Grandparents need grander ideas, especially about their evolutionary roles. Altruism supports the grander parenting that can motivate elders. Higher evolution, I'm using some of Roszak's ideas, can imagine the whole world as a servicing organism tacitly maintained by human decency, not by the survival of the gene, tacitly maintained by human decency. Because that's the real fundamental mystery. If we are living in a predator gene world, why is there so much decency? Why are people so honest? That's the most extraordinary mystery of all. It is unseemly for a mature person who would mentor others and foster civilization's future to hold to simplistic geneticism, to believe that we're each directed by our genes and that their self-perpetuation is the origin of even our altruistic acts. That theory discounts generosity, conceiving it to be indirectly promoting the species' gene pool. It discounts our wish for the welfare of others, including the conservation of nature and the preservation of history. It makes of self-sacrifice merely the selfish gene's manipulation in aid of its own survival. Psychopaths think this way too, which to my elderly mind means that the selfish gene theory, even while it promotes evolution, gives authoritative backing to the selfish individualism of psychopathy and is in effect a psychopathic idea. Because grandparents have little time left, they generally relish this world and its beauty. Yet they have one foot in another world. They can see the angel in the child and its calling. They can imagine the child beyond its childhood, even if this insight becomes tetchy and opinionated. The idea behind the insight is precious, for it affirms the reality of the angel, calling, character, destiny, lifting the child from his toys to the skies. Inspiration also belongs to grandparenting. The mythical grandmothers give grounding. They provide footholds for the first adventurous steps, and they are permanent, indestructible, and absolute in their giving. Grandparenting inoculates the child against paranoia. The very way an old lady crosses the street or talks with a stranger shows that confidence, demonstrating to younger persons that they can step forward without worry. It's like an animal faith, an instinctive reliance on the world. The sky will not fall in, the ground underfoot not give way. It shows faith in the child's ability to find its way, rather than hope that the child will realize your investment, which is the parent's thing. It shows faith in the child's ability to find its way, rather than hope that the child will realize your investment. Grandparenting says, yes, you belong here. The world has place after place where you may stand and be well. Don't worry, but don't be stupid either. We impede evolution and the development of the human species when we neglect the aged. This we will do until we recognize that their character can shelter civilization from its own predatory frenzy. This too is Rozak's thought, in my words. It is not merely a defense of the old by a couple of old men of the same generation, but a defense of the values of civilization against the destructive force and narrowed imagination of genetic engineering, hog-wild capitalism, technocratic government, and the salvational fundamentalism that would leap over the beauty of this world in a rush to the next. What is left when we old ones have left is that beauty, the younger generation's inheritance. Before we leave, we need to uphold our side of the compact of mutual support between human being and the being of the planet, giving back what we have taken, securing its lasting beyond our own. I think I'll stop there.